Hello there. Today I'm continuing my look at some of the Syrahs from Hawke's Bay, from the Bridge Parr Triangle production area. So this is Ash Ridge's Reserve Syrah from 2019. As I say, the reason that we at Wine Searcher have been looking at these wines is that we're thinking about producing a wine from Syrah, from Bridge Parr ourselves this year, just to see how we can get on with that. So this is us trying to see the sort of styles that's possible to make. So Ash Ridge, owned by somebody called Chris Willcock, and in 2000 he at that stage was a banker working internationally, and he purchased a 9-hectare peach orchard right in the middle of Bridge Parr. Now, he didn't actually do anything with it until 2005, when he actually instigated the planting of some vines. I believe he was still working overseas at that time, but the date for establishment on the label is given as 2005. In 2007, Chris retired from banking, came back to his native New Zealand, and has been working with the vineyard since then. Now, Chris has a winemaker, Lauren Swift, who has been working with him for most of the time that he's had the vineyard there. The vineyard specialises in the production of Chardonnay and Syrah. Lauren certainly has spent some time working in Cote Rotie for a very highly reputed producer there called Stephane Ogier, and I think that's had quite a large impact on the style of Lauren's winemaking. They do also obtain fruit from the neighbouring vineyard, which they have a hand in managing, and so in total I think they manage about 14 hectares of vines. The soils in this part of Bridge Parr are a 40 centimetre deep clay loam over the classic red metal gravels that you get in Bridge Parr. The clones that they've selected to use are a mixture, about half and half, of one called Chave, named after the producer in the Rhone Valley, from whose vineyard it's taken, and then there's another clone called MS, which my understanding means Massal Selection. Now, I don't know whether that's a Massal selection that they have taken from their own vineyards. I believe it may actually be a Massal selection that somebody else has taken and created as a clone that's just referred to as MS. But the approach of Massal selection is a very French idea. You go into your vineyard, you identify the vines that are giving you the best results, and you propagate those, and thus you're almost continually selecting within your vineyard to improve the quality of the vine material in the way in which you want it to show itself. The vineyard here is, since 2013, has been unirrigated. It's completely dry farmed. It does mean there was irrigation as the vines established themselves, but once they had a fully developed root system that could go down and explore and find sufficient water for themselves. I know the vineyard was in conversion to organics. The 2019 here has no note of being organically certified on its label, so possibly organic certification hadn't been achieved by this stage. I don't know an awful lot about the winemaking here whatsoever. Everything's hand-picked. I don't think that's at all surprising. I believe that Lauren will often do a proportion of fermentation as whole bunches, so leaving the stems in the fermentation, which will add some tannins, it will alter the colour. But when she does that, she doesn't just include that in the total fermentation, it's done separately, giving her a blending option that can be blended back into the wine at a later date, if that works. So it's keeping control over it. And quite a lot of the winemaking here has been done in such a way that everything is vinified individually by plot, so that each plot with its own different style can be slightly differently managed if necessary. Don't have any details as regard the wine's oak aging regime, but there are plenty of references to plentiful toasty oak, so I'm assuming that this wine ages in fair proportion of new oak. The wines are bottled without fining and filtration, so there's an obvious desire to maintain the flavours and aromas from the fermenter into the bottle and finally into the glass. So let's see what we make of the wine, shall we? First thing to say, there's a really good depth of colour, real concentration there. I can just about make out the stem as I look down there, so it's not quite opaque, but yes, a deep dark ruby. Swirling it, the wine actually only has 12.5% alcohol, so not particularly high for Syrah. And eventually it does form some tears on the side of the glass there, but they take a little while to fall. Let's have a look at the aromas, shall we? Oh gosh, the aromas of this wine are where I start having a problem. because they're incredibly reduced and they're very sulfidic. They're actually quite unpleasant. There's an aroma of dirty drains or rotten eggs there. And what that is that's sulfide reduction. The wine hasn't received enough oxygen to allow the fruit aromas to express themselves, and it's closed in on itself. In some cases that can actually develop into what's called a mercaptan, which can be a hideous aroma of almost like rotting fish. Thankfully this hasn't reached that stage yet. And also I did identify that in a tasting I did earlier. As a result, I've done something to mitigate that. So I have here another glass of the same wine that I poured about half an hour ago, into which I've put a British 2-penny coin. I selected one from prior to 1992 because at that stage British coinage still had a proportion of copper in it. And the idea is that when the copper comes into contact with the sulfides in the wine, the two react and it removes them. And yes, given time and also given some air as well, you know, the exposure to oxygen, that set of aromas has changed completely. I mean, it's still quite tight, it's still quite spicy and savoury. There are notes of black olive, there are notes of pepper, very, very vivid black pepper actually. But this is much more classic Syrah, much in the style of a sort of a Northern Rhone, a Cote Rotie, that sort of quite tight, tannic style. There are some hints of the oak, there are some chocolatey hints. And there's a slightly leathery, slightly pruny, black plum, ripe black cherry fruit. You know, it's a fruit with a real depth, and there is that sort of leathery, high ripeness edge to it. But you've lost that, the sort of the stink that the sulfides give the wine. And this is a much more attractive aroma. So let's taste. On the palate, that's still very savoury. It's almost meaty, notes of bloody meat. There is that pepperiness. There's a rich, almost licoricey sort of note. There's good grip. There's a nice tannic structure there. There's some fine, slightly dusty tannins, quite sort of grainy structure. The wine is medium to full-bodied, and considering it's only 12.5% alcohol, there's some real richness in the fruit that's giving it some roundness. The finish has a nice freshness that's allowing some of those peppery notes to come through at the end. And there's still some of that high ripeness, dark plum fruit, maybe with a slight sort of note of prune over ripeness there. And those flavours are lasting really well. I mean, this is still quite a tight, brooding wine that I think will probably benefit from 3 or 4 years at least in bottle, maybe 5 or 6, before it fully opens out and shows more delicate, developed fruit. By that stage, it'll probably be showing some developed sort of more sort of savoury mushroom and those sort of notes. But I think this is a wine that once you've got past the sulfide has some ability to age and would probably lose a lot of that sort of sulfidic note in the bottle anyway. It may not have been helped by the fact it's in a screw cap, but really interesting to look at that and to taste the difference that a little bit of exposure to copper has made to this wine. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you found this of interest. If you've enjoyed it, do please press the like button. Any comments you have, please leave those in the comments box below. We'd love to hear your views, your feedback. Please feel free to share the video with anybody you think might be interested by it. It would be fantastic also if you thought about signing up and following us on YouTube. But most importantly, I do hope you'll make some time, come and join us in the very near future for another tasting, won't you? Thanks again. Bye for now.